Good morning. I'm Danny Wyndham. I am with Digium. Digium is the creator, the sponsor, and the maintainer of the Asterisk open source project. We're also a creator of small and medium-sized business communications products and services. We've recently launched a communications platform as a service. I see Digium as a very data-driven organization. I'm a very data-driven guy. When I was asked to do this keynote, I thought, could I go research some data that would help me do a better job of delivering a keynote? And I really couldn't find anything about what you guys want, but I did find some very startling facts about the audience itself. So, for example, since last night's reception had free alcohol, an estimated 21% of you are hungover, and you're not going to remember anything that I said. About 27% of you are going to become totally preoccupied with your mobile device, and you won't hear what I said. About 17% of you are actually competitors of ours, and I really don't care if you hear what I say or not. 22% of you are engineers or technical experts, and you already think you know more than any keynote presenter could know anyway, and so you're not listening. And 3% of you are in the wrong room and just haven't figured it out yet. So that only leaves me 10% of the audience, and the data suggests that the 10% that really matters sit right here. So I'm talking to you guys today. Oh, and by the way, about 97% of those facts I just spewed all were made up. So I enjoy coming to this show because I enjoy listening to what other people think will happen in our industry. And if you listen to the keynotes that have been given from this stage in the past, there have been a lot of discussions about change in our industry. But most of the change that's been talked about has been changes in the underlying technology. The way we build our communication systems, the infrastructure, the pipes, the plumbing. And there's been very little discussion on change about the way we use our communication systems. You know, our industry hasn't really been noted as being leaders in the world of innovation. Maybe there have been regulatory things that have stifled innovation in our industry. Perhaps maybe the existing market shareholders have served to try to minimize competition. And if you look back upon what's happened over the last 100 years, the way we use our communication systems really haven't changed much. You know, 100 years ago, when the phone first became an important element in business communications, this might be a typical construct of what, you know, a business office looked like. It took 35 years to fast forward to the spot where the National Numbering Plan was introduced, and the change that you could see on your desktop was the phone got a rotary dial, and you could dial the number instead of having someone else dial it for you. Fast forward another 20 years, about the time of the touchtone introduction, and the change you could see on your desktop was the phone no longer had a rotary dial, it had buttons. Fast forward another 20 years, about the time of the divestiture of AT&T. The baby bells were created. The change, the innovation that you could see on your desktop was the phone got a lot of buttons. And then by the beginning of this decade, which, by the way, just interestingly was the year that the last small town in the U.S. got phone service, we had all turned our desk into some sort of shrine for communication devices. We had fax machines and scanners and business phones and computers and maybe second monitors. And we did that because we needed them. All of those devices performed a discrete individual function, and they weren't really all integrated together. In fact, the way most businesses implement their communications today is as a standalone app. Communications is essentially on an island. We all use apps, tools, and software to run our underlying business, but today most of you have done very little to integrate those apps with your communication solutions. So today I'd like to talk about a change that at least we see coming, and that change is not about the underlying technology itself, it's about the way we use our communications products and services. In the future, communications is going to be voted off the island. Communications is going to be integrated with other apps. Communications will be integrated into every aspect of how our businesses operate. You know, if you're going to spend any time trying to predict the future, I think it's always helpful to look at the past and try to understand why things changed the way they changed in an effort to try to make a better estimation of what's going to happen in the future. And when I do that analysis, what I conclude is technology certainly plays a major role in how things evolve, but technological advancements are not what drives change. Lower cost is what drives change. Money is really the thing that causes mass adoption of new products or services. If you look at some of the significant changes that have occurred, at least during my time in this industry, which we won't talk about how long that is, when I came into this industry, business communications was really all about voice. Voice was a TDM signal. There was a TDM network that carried voice. And voice over IP emerged as an alternative, and it was driven because you could avoid paying long-distance fees. So cost drove the early adoption of voice over IP. But it really wasn't until such time as the amount of data that was being generated in the nation's network far exceeded the amount of voice traffic, such that it became really cheap just to let the voice ride on the existing data network, that we saw mass adoption of voice over IP. Correspondingly, when I entered this industry, business communications machine was a PBX. PBX was a big iron thing. In fact, if you were a medium-sized business even, it might take up an entire room. Over the past 20 years, we've seen an evolution from hardware-based products to software-based products. And while this, once again, might seem like a technological enabled change, and to some degree it is, this really was about cost, because general-purpose computing platforms came along that got powerful enough and cheap enough that it eliminated the need for the dedicated big iron hardware that it required at the time to process those analog signals. Today we're on the front end of a change of communications moving to the cloud. And for some companies, this will truly be a lower cost way of doing business. But this change is a little different, and it's interesting because this change enables a shift in the business model of the end users that are using the communications products and services. For many small and medium-sized businesses, it's a daunting task to have to build and operate an IT infrastructure, particularly if their expertise is not in the area of IT. So the ability to outsource this to a service provider who, at least theoretically, should be able to do it better, more reliably, and cheaper, frees up the business to spend their money on doing what they do best, and in most cases get a very high ROI. However, even in this model, we've still done very little to integrate communications into our business processes, because today there's very little integration between cloud-based communications and the other apps that you use to run your company. At least in my view, the future of communications is communications will move to the core of your business. Communications will be voted off the island. Communications will not be a standalone app. Communications will be integrated into every aspect of how your business works, and you will communications enable your business processes so that they are more efficient. So why do I think this is going to happen? Hopefully I've established the case that lower cost is what drives change, and I contend that this model is going to drive significantly lower cost. For some organizations, it will just be a lower cost model. For most, it will allow the organization to operate so much more efficiently that the cost savings comes through avoiding cost or productivity enhancements. Why do I think this change is happening now? The way we communicate is changing. When I entered this industry, business communications was all about voice. Today, it's not just a voice world. Lots of alternatives of how we legitimately need to communicate within business in fashions other than just talking with each other. Where we communicate is changing. A company used to be a place that you went to, and now with distributed workforces and mobile workforces, our communications products and services are struggling to allow us to be as productive as we were when everyone could be located in one location. And the tools with which we communicate are changing. In the past, business communications was about a phone on a desk. Today, we all have mobile devices, cell phones, laptops, tablets, maybe desktop machines. And in the computing world, we have all of those devices because they have some unique utility, and we want to use the right tool at the right time. We need to be in the position to have that exact same philosophy in the communication space. We need to use every one of those devices along with your business phone to communicate from a business perspective, and they need to be seamlessly integrated into your communications plan. Now, you might think that communications enabling your business processes is only for very sophisticated organizations. But I contend that every business, independent of where you are on the communications technology adoption curve, can ride this wave. You can make your business more efficient. Even if you tell me the boss is a Luddite and we haven't invested in our communications equipment in 10 years. Well, my first question for you is, how did you get him to sign off on coming to an IT event in Miami in January? But then, if you say, we haven't invested in our communications equipment in 10 years, a simple step for you to ride this wave is to simply buy a current communications product. In the 10 years since you installed a PBX, Unified Communication Solutions have displaced PBXs, and UC Solutions incorporate support for other modes of communications other than just voice. So you will at least have integrated all of your communication functions in one place. And when you make the decision to buy a UC solution, buy one with a well-supported, published, and broad API, because that's going to set you up for step 2. If you would classify your organization as mildly progressive, then the next appropriate step for you to communications enable your business processes is to be very selective about the products that you buy and ensure that not just your UC solution is built with APIs, but that other apps that you're running in your company have APIs as well. Now, an application programming interface is typically thought of to be able to customize the way this software works for your business to optimize for your business processes. But the fact that these products have APIs, manufacturers are using those APIs to deliver canned levels of integration between the apps out of the box. So, for example, there are UC solutions and productivity suites with canned level of integration, which would enable you to do things like drive your present status based upon calendar entries, or maybe place a call directly from a vCard, or maybe place a call directly from within a document. There are CRM solutions and UC solutions with canned levels of integration out of the box. It allows your sales department to be able to see a customer record, have that screen pop based upon caller ID of a customer calling in. It would allow your salespeople to do things like record a conversation with a customer and automatically attach it to a CRM record. If you would classify your company as moderately progressive, then take a step beyond what the vendors have provided you. Use the API to communications enable some business process inside your company. Doesn't have to be a difficult one, it can be very simple. As an example, we have a customer that's a dentist, not a programmer, a dentist. And in running his business, he uses a resource and patient management system as a UC solution with an API. And he wrote scripts to have the patient management system tell the communication solution, call these patients. They've got an appointment coming this week. Play a message, make them acknowledge they received the message, thereby freeing up staff to be able to do more valuable things. A very large ROI on this amount of work to be able to better utilize the staff. If you would classify your company as cautiously adventurous, then it's possible in attempting to communications enable your business processes that you're going to run out of steam using APIs provided by vendors. You may find yourself constrained. If what you want to do is complicated or it's very unique to your business, you might have to write specific software to enable that yourself. Next appropriate step in this class is to employ an open source communications engine into your communications infrastructure, because an open source engine gives you the ultimate flexibility to be able to write software to automate any process that you want to automate. An example of an organization that's done this is the Alabama Public School System. The Alabama Public School System operates a student management system, and that SMS knows everything about all the students in the public school system. They wanted the ability to communications enable the business process of notifying parents when a student didn't show up for class, or a weather event has impacted school schedule, or, God forbid, there's a shooter on campus. So they worked with an organization called Sky Airtime that used an open source engine, in this case specifically Asterisk, and integrated it with their student management system so that in the event of some emergency, or in the event of a non-emergency, like a student not showing up for class, up to 1 million communications in 1 hour could be made, something that wasn't possible without doing this in a custom fashion. If you would classify your company as aggressively adventurous, then you need to introduce yourself to the world of web communications. Web communications is about moving communications to the web in an analogous fashion that email moved to the web. Web communications is about writing custom communication scripts very simply using current web technologies. JavaScript, HTML, cascading style sheets. The place that web communications is headed inherently supports lots of different types of communications. Voice, video, chat, screen sharing, file sharing. The place where we're headed is peer-to-peer, and it's inherently encrypted. It's going to be very disruptive. The peer-to-peer element means all this traffic goes around the traditional communication service providers. Web communications and its advancement will ride the heels of the adoption of WebRTC. WebRTC is an emerging standard. It is going to be supported by a number of web browsers. Chrome and Firefox are sort of leading the pack today. And a device with a web browser that supports WebRTC becomes capable of being a communications endpoint for web communication apps and services without having to load any client software onto that machine. So if you are a company and you have customers, market forecasters predict there are going to be 6 billion WebRTC-enabled devices within 4 years. So it's very likely that your customer will be carrying a device that would allow them to inherently communicate with you without you having to do anything to that device. So if you're a business and you're in business to do something other than run your IT communications infrastructure, you might say, well, that sounds pretty cool, but that sounds hard. How would I do that? The truth is, it's not going to be hard because there's a new breed of service providers emerging offering a service called Communications Platform as a Service, and it is a web API. It's targeted to web developers, and it's designed to allow you to easily communications enable business processes by transferring the heavy lifting of that process to a cloud-based service. It also helps ensure connectivity between endpoints. In today's world, firewalls create all sorts of disruption in connecting endpoints, and it employs services like Stun and Turn to help make sure that connections happen. And it works something like this. Let's pretend you are a company, you operate a website, and you have a salesperson. That salesperson in this example is going to be Bob. And Bob works in the company, and he's got a computer, and it's running a web-enabled web browser, WebRTC-enabled web browser. And you've got a customer. And in this case, the customer is Alice. Alice is running an Android-based tablet. And Alice is browsing your website, and she has a question about product Z, and there's a button on your website that says, press here to talk with Bob. She presses that button, and a communication session is established between Alice and Bob. It was established because the web developer enabled that button with some code that connects to a communications platform as a service. The platform as a service took care of all the heavy lifting in getting that communication established. Once it's established, the media flows directly from Bob to Alice. So you say, well, that's cool, but that's not really the way our business works. Today we've got salespeople, we've got big unified communication system. We have call queues, we have product experts. So I would like to sit around like George Jetson, and what you just described seems like it's going to be hard for me. So what do I do? Well, what if you integrated your website with your unified communication solution? So you did buy a UC solution with an API, right? So in the example we just talked about, instead of having Alice talk to Bob, which might not be the way your company really runs, if you're using a communications platform as a service, you're using a UC solution with an API, then it's very easy to have Alice press the button on the website. She's looking at product Z. She wants more information. It says, click here to talk to an agent. By pressing that button, can initiate a call, pass the context of where Alice was on your website to your UC solution, deliver that call into a call queue based on skills-based routing that delivers Alice to a product expert. All of this is capable today, relatively simple, using the right UC solution with an API and a communications platform as a service. So maybe there are some of you out there, or some of you out here, who say, gosh, we're doing all that today. We are among the early adopters, so bring it. What can we do? Well, there is an appropriate step for your organization. For your organization, you can go build it. These tools allow you to build communication functions and features that weren't possible in the past. Amazon did it. The new Kindle Fire includes a button called a Mayday button. And when you press the Mayday button, it's like saying, talk to Bob now. It creates a connection between the Kindle Fire, which has a camera, runs a WebRTC-enabled web browser, to a tech support person at Amazon. Amazon reports that 75% of all support interactions on the Kindle now come through the Mayday button. How about building a customer portal for your website? Customers come to your website with a WebRTC-enabled device, and a communication session starts out as a chat. Customer needs a little more information. That session gets promoted to a voice call. Customer needs more information. Session gets promoted to a video call. Customer is still confused. Sales guy says, let me share my screen with you so you can see what I'm trying to tell you. Screen sharing becomes enabled. Or perhaps it's a tech support interaction. And the tech support agent says, let me take control of your camera. Let me see what it is you're telling me is wrong, and I can help you with your problem. All of these things are possible today. But you have to change your mindset to want to communications enable all of your business processes. No more context switching between one app and communications. Communications being voted off the island. Communications is no longer a standalone app. So in conclusion, I contend that what hasn't changed for 100 years is going to change dramatically over the next few years, and it's the way we use our communications products and services. We're going to communications enable all business processes because it is a much more efficient way to do business and ultimately a lower cost way to do business. This is going to have direct effects in the industry. There are going to be companies that are going to be disrupted. The traditional service providers are going to be disrupted. There are going to be new companies emerge offering these types of products and services. It's going to have indirect effects. Indirect effects such as, today we have this thing called a universal service fund. This model flows traffic around the traditional service providers, which is defined as how the universal service fund gets funded. That funding mechanism will be broken. So there are all sorts of ramifications what's going to happen here. But a few years from now, when we have spent the energy to communications enable every aspect of how our business works, from business processes to our website, we're going to look back at today, and the model that we use today is going to look as antiquated then as that rotary phone looks to us today. All right, thanks, and I think I have a couple minutes for questions.